for the producer.
Right. Okay. We are live, supposedly.
Awesome. Well, let's give it a minute here to see.
Yeah. See if anybody joins us. Had quite a few people sign up, which is awesome. And we will be providing this recording later on as well. We want to offer this as a resource. I need to mute this so that we don't get a feedback loop here. Okay. We are streaming very well through Boomcaster.
Yep, we're live.
Yeah. And we'll give people a couple minutes, but we'll get some chit chat out of the way. I am in my new studio. This is my first live stream from my new studio. We moved to Minnesota and I still haven't set everything up, but this is my command station.
You haven't set everything up, really? I mean,
no. Well, I've got like my hardware set up. I haven't done like, there's no acoustic panels mounted back here yet. I want to do some different fabric. You can see I've just kind of got a couple propped up over here, but then, you know, I've got those just kind of propped up on the back of the love seat back there. So
well, yeah,
still, it's a work in progress.
You have to show them the studio setup. At some point, you have to do a walkthrough, but today maybe you should at least, you know, give them a bird's eye view.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we'll do a studio walkthrough at some point, but we are going to take questions at the end, but we're just going to have a casual conversation about recording, just like we're recording and streaming as well. So we are recording this full resolution thanks to Boomcaster. Each of our discrete videos at 1080p, as well as the audio and discrete WAV files, which I could edit and post later. I don't know if I'm going to have to, since we're hopefully going to do a good job and not have to edit. But we've got that option. All right, people are showing up. Thanks for being here.
Oh, we have a few folks.
Yeah. Hello, people. If you want to
Warren,
put in the comments what where you're hailing from, where you're joining us.
Yeah,
from.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Where are you?
Tell us where you're from.
I am outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hari, you're in North Carolina?
I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a couple of miles from UNC.
Nice. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll just introduce myself first. For those of you who don't know me, my name is dePaula. I am an audio engineer. I am a consultant, podcast producer, gotten into video these past like 3 years. I used to build websites. I got my career started out touring with bands, doing sound reinforcement and concerts for about a decade. And that's how my audio engineering expertise started, doing live events. And I have fortunately been able to parlay that into my passion for audio doing this now. And now I'm also developing a passion for video and streaming. So, and I am working on some resources to help podcasters and streamers elevate their production quality, because I feel like there's a lot of people that have experience streaming and recording, but not enough actual engineers that are doing a good job. There are a lot of engineers, you know, giving information, but it's usually for musicians, not specifically for podcasting and streaming. So I'm going to try to help with that.
You know, you're at the intersection of music, engineering, podcasting, production, which is exactly why I wanted you on this conversation. So thank you.
Thanks for thinking about doing this. You asked me to do this just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
like, yeah, let's do it.
All of our customers have been asking about this for, you know, and I know you've done one of the demos previously. And so, yeah, this is a great opportunity for us to connect with all of our customers and other listeners, and in general, you know, educational topic around podcasting. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Hari Gopalakrishna. I'm the founder and CEO of Boomcaster, the application that we're currently using to both record and stream this podcast and session. You know, maybe just a little bit about how I got here. My background is in technology, but 3 years ago, I started a technology podcast, and I bumped up against a number of challenges around recording in high quality remotely. My co-host was in Houston, And I realized that there was no easy way to get this done in a very effective, efficient way and have good quality audio and video. And in fact, both of us also wanted to go live at the same time. And that suddenly that narrowed the list to almost nothing
Right.
at the time. And so I set out on a journey to build something that is easy to use and reliable, that folks can use, even those without technical background can use. Because I've come across some applications, and even now there are some today that are, very feature rich, but at the same time complex and overwhelming to use during an interview. Because in a podcast, doing an interview is the most important thing. Software should not show up, for any reason. It should not distract you in any way. So that's been my journey, and I would say it is still, a journey. I am continuing to take feedback from folks like yourself, Martin, Danny Brown, Jeff Townsend, all these folks that are, in the podcasting community, and I continue to make it better. And my focus is to make this uncomplicated and reliable. Those are the only two things that I'm interested in.
And that's why I choose to use Boomcaster. I have tried all the options, and there are other great options out there, but I am very glad to be using this tool that you've spent so much time and effort, and you've clearly put a lot of thought into the details that make it as easy as possible, but also the reliability factor, because you want stuff to work at the end of the day too. And yes, there's some fun bells and whistles and stuff like that, but if it doesn't work, those bells and whistles don't really help.
Doesn't help at all. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you. And I appreciate that kind gesture, especially coming from someone like you with your background. Maybe we can kick off this conversation with, you're in many different roles with your customers, right? You're a producer, you're a consultant, you edit both video, audio, and I've seen your studio. It is, I don't even understand how it's set up. I might need a class in that. So look at that. And for those who are watching this, that's a very small studio setup. I'm curious, when you work with your customers, like, what are the top challenges that you run into? What problems do you see? And, it doesn't necessarily have to do with software. Like, just what is it that you run into? What are the biggest problems?
Yeah, and that's the focus that I tend to see almost universally is on, like, everybody always thinks the first thing, which is the microphone. And so that conversation is pretty quick and easy. The microphone that you have, the AT 2100 is a great choice. Samsung Q2U, that sort of thing. I've got an Ethos, but the microphone is like that is the easiest part. And once it's done, it's done. Like, that's not the complicated part. The worst part of my job is the communication. And that is the biggest challenge. And I know that's not very sexy. It's not fun to talk about communication, but it is by far the biggest challenge that I have, not just with my clients, but especially with the guests, because the hardest part is making sure, like, once my setup and once my clients set up, once they bought everything I've told them and set it up exactly how I tell them to do it, then we're set and we're off and rolling. But every week we have different guests. And so every week I'm having to communicate the same information over and over again. And that's one of the things I love, the way you've done it in Boomcaster with the email prompting and the little clues and things that kind of help get the guests in, because the guests can be very, very intimidated. The vast majority of guests that my clients have are nervous because they don't do this regularly, like you and I do. And I don't even do it regularly myself compared to a lot of my clients. But having those messaging and the details kind of come at you in a way that makes you feel less nervous and anxious about the process is going to ensure not just higher quality recording as far as the technical part, like the audio files, the video, the way the video looks, but also them engaging with you in the interview itself. Because there's a mental block that can happen, with those nerves a lot of times. And so I really appreciate the way that you've laid out, the email communications when you invite someone to a session.
Yeah.
And then I do have a very simplified process to do that, because I see a lot of advice out there when onboarding guests where you just kind of send them to a generic form on your webpage, or you send them this automated email thing with this massive checklist of all the technical requirements. And that is not going to do justice. It's not going to serve your podcast very well when you overwhelm them with information. And
so what do you consider are the top things that you should communicate?
So I always start with, just like with the conversation with my clients, what microphone do you have? And that's the biggest hurdle, I feel like, and the thing that's going to make the biggest difference up front. And unfortunately, there are so many people that are used to just doing the online calls, the web calls with just their laptop speaker or maybe some AirPods. They're just like, oh, I just usually, I don't use headphones. I don't use.
That's what I do.
Yeah. It's been fine. I've even been on other podcasts, and that's what they had me do. And it's like, well, and then if they don't have even just the earbuds, like these wired earbuds to plug in, this little microphone's like a lapel mic basically, then I can actually send them a kit. And so, but I start this conversation with them, and it just starts with one simple question, because I don't want to overwhelm them, like I said, with the long, super technical list of things. And then from there, once they say, I have a microphone, I don't have a microphone, then it's like, okay, let's talk about headphones. That actually secondary to the microphone, and maybe even more so than the microphone, headphones can impact the audio quality, because you can then turn echo cancellation off, which greatly improves the fidelity. Because every time, if I had echo cancellation on right now, every time you talked, when your voice came through my speakers, if I didn't have headphones on, it would feed back into the microphone. And so the echo cancellation mutes everything on my end. And that not just affects the recording, it also impacts the conversation, because then you can talk over me and not hear my response in real time. So anyway, there's all these details, and I just start to go through microphone, then headphones, then internet connection, then, the browser, all those little things, just doing it one or maybe two at a time.
Yeah, echo cancellation is a topic that folks don't know a whole lot about, right? So it is a good thing in some cases. When you're on a conference call, you don't have a headphone, it's a good thing to have. But when you're recording high definition, high quality audio, it compresses it. And if that's what you're saying, like if you talk over someone, it compresses the audio and it basically distorts it. Right?
Yes, and maybe we could do another live stream, and I'll get things set up to where we can actually sample. I'll record some stuff beforehand, and we can look at the waveforms and stuff and see how the echo cancellation is actually affecting the audio signal itself in the recordings. I think that would be interesting. But yeah, it basically mutes the other person when you talk, so that microphone isn't going to cause you to hear an echo of yourself back through their microphone.
Yeah. Do we want to show how it's set up? How you would set up a?
So
maybe that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I've got another instance of Boomcaster open in Microsoft Edge. So, Boomcaster runs in Chrome and Edge, and that's one of the details I communicate. And that's, and I always include a string of words together. Here's the link that you need to open in Chrome on your computer, because I have some guests are like trying to join from their iPhone, or trying to just open it in Safari, and you guys have an alert that comes up that says this browser's not supported if they try to open Safari.
And while you're setting it up, I can explain also why those two browsers. We find them to be the most modern and most reliable, and by opening up to browsers that don't give us the warm and fuzzies around what capabilities the browser has to help record high quality video and audio, we simply don't want to take that chance. So it's really for reliability reasons. We could make this work, but I would rather have you and your guest have a reliable recording experience rather than having to deal with browser issues.
Right. Yes. All right. So I'm going to enter the room here. and you see these prompts like I was talking about, the communication. A lot of people just click through anyway, but we're at least trying to inform them. And then there's additional ones here, which is great. And then I need to allow my microphone, which you guys probably didn't see the pop-ups, but it asked me to give permission.
First time you use a browser, it's going to prompt you. Browser wants to know if it's okay to give Boomcaster permission.
Right. And then I can pick my camera, and I can pick my headphones. I'm just going to use, I don't want to do that. Let's do something that I'm not using, my Pro Tools bridge, which is not enabled right now. And then my iPhone connected. That's actually one of the cool things, is that people can use their iPhone if you've got it connected both as a camera and a microphone, which is kind of nice. But let's do my mix pre so we can see my audio. I also like how when you have this going and they try to click next and they haven't done a test with the talk, it says, we're not hearing you. You may need to turn up your volume. I'm like, oh, test, test, test. And then I could click next.
Or sometimes they pick the wrong device, right?
Right. And that is another thing, that a lot of people are just so used to kind of clicking through quickly, frantically to get through because they're running behind or whatever, and they don't pay attention to the settings. And so then I have to talk them through, and that's the next phase of this. Like, there's the communication beforehand, and then there's the communication as they join. But if I do my job beforehand, I will inform them, make sure you choose, make sure your microphone is connected, make sure that your headphones are connected and your camera is connected before you click the link. And then once you join, you can choose them and click next. I did, by the way, Hari, I haven't told you this before. I had one elderly guest who did not enter his name, and he got flustered because he said it wouldn't let him join. And it gave the little, alert that you need to fill this out, but he got stuck on that for some reason. So just
maybe it wasn't very clear.
Well, like I said, he was elderly, and so maybe there was a vision, disability thing.
We should definitely look into that.
Yeah. But here's the echo cancellation, and it's on by default because you wanted to make sure that it was as safe and that
Yes.
Yeah.
I know the professionals like you don't like it, but I leave it on for safety reasons. But you always have the control to go and disable that anytime.
Right. And you just launched version 2, which includes this join as a producer, which is what I've been using for my clients because I run recording sessions, but I don't need to be on screen. And this is fantastic. And we'll do another live stream about that whole thing. But here's where you turn echo cancellation off. And by the way, I am wearing headphones. They're just custom molded in-ear monitors from my musician touring days, that like what people wear on stage. So they're kind of hard to see. And it's nice for video because the cable runs like behind it and you don't see the headphone cable and stuff.
Not the cheap ones like this, I bet.
Hey, cheap is better than nothing. So And I kind of like the big cans. Like, it's like, yes, we're podcasting. Some of my clients don't like the headphone look, so we have to deal with echo cancellation on. And then you also added this AI speech transcription, which is great. And I do have that enabled for this as well. So let's go ahead and get this going here.
And when you turn that on, it enables both the transcriptions and closed captions.
Right. Okay, so we don't have a guest on this one, but I do so you can see, like with Hari, before I screen shared, we had 2 squares on screen, and I'm seeing the same thing as the host, and just pretend like there's a second square with the guest next to me, and there's this little info button that lets me see their device. So then I can check and make sure if it says, if the headphones says it says built-in speakers, MacBook Pro or whatever, and it says built-in microphone for the microphone up here instead of their USB microphone or whatever they have connected. My audio interface is a mix pre. Then I can instruct them. I can say, go to the bottom. There's the little settings icon down here at the bottom, which is obscured for me by this screen sharing text. I think it's right there. And then I tell them, okay, click on that, then choose your microphone, and then click save. And then it's like fine. It takes 2 seconds. It does sometimes add a little bit of stress to things, but once we have that, it's also my chance to make them feel taken care of, either as the host or as the producer. They're like, okay, I got you. This is going to be okay. This is normal.
Yeah.
And it's just as easy as clicking that setting. And then the other thing is this little bar right here, and that's one of the other things is I feel like there's multiple stages of communication. The first one is beforehand. Then there's the communication that happens right at the beginning of the connection when the session first starts to make sure everything's set up. There are some podcasters that recommend doing a sound check on a different day, and some even insist. I personally don't feel comfortable asking that much time from my clients' guests, much less my clients. So I feel like within just 2 to 3 minutes, I can get things situated with them by looking at the data on the screen and being able to talk them through getting things changed on their end. And it's not worth it for me to book another 20-minute session with them a whole other day in advance or whatever. And then the next phase of communication is when I'm monitoring these settings during the actual recording. So after I hit start recording, then I keep an eye on these settings. There's this little eye window at the bottom, and it'll also have the guests listed underneath there. And so here is where I can turn echo cancellation off or on if I need it. I can also adjust the volume here. And that's something I will communicate with them beforehand, especially if they're clipping, if they're distorting. I can see on the meter here if it gets red, then I will ask them to go into their computer settings, or if they have a knob, depending on the interface. And that's the other thing. I can, since I can see what interface they have, I can go ahead and tell them, okay, on your Scarlett 2i2, take the gain knob for input 1 and turn it down to about 11 o'clock. Or, if on your Blue Yeti, turn it around and make sure that the gain is set to about 11 o'clock. Those two just happen to be the same. That's not universal. And then the other thing with the Blue Yeti is making sure the pattern is set on the right thing. I had a interview with Dulé Hill, the actor, and he had a Blue Yeti, and it was set to omnidirectional. And I was able to teach him that, and he's like, "Oh wow!" And he was so happy to know, that setting, and that made him feel more comfortable doing the interview and everything. So yeah, and then so during the session, I'm keeping an eye on this stuff. The other thing is the upload speed. So right here under the upload, it will give you a percentage of how much of the file. So while we are recording here, what's going on? How are you explaining? Because this is your
Yeah. So, one of the things Boomcaster does is captures high quality audio and video and saves that to the cloud within your dashboard. So for that, we are in the background taking the file, basically packaging them and sending to the cloud. And if your network connection is not as great, we will pause the upload automatically and resume when the connection is good. But you'll see the status regardless. And if it's paused, you'll see that it's paused.
Right.
But that's what gives you the super high quality separate tracks for your publishing needs and editing needs.
So it's recording into the cache of the browser. Yes. And so even though you're not seeing a file discreetly on your device, and that's the other thing of making this easy for the guests, is that they don't have to then send you a file afterwards.
Correct.
And that's the other main reason that I do this. I want to make it as easy as possible for the guests, even afterwards, to not have to do anything. Like once we stop recording, they say goodbye and they're done, and they don't have to think about the process anymore. But I have run into a problem where there was a client who had an old MacBook Air that had a very small amount of storage, and it was already maxed out before we started, and it stopped recording in the middle, and we had to pause. They had to get their IT person on and clear off some space, but they did it really quick. Yeah. And then we continued the interview. and I was able to restart the recording, and we just in editing, in post, I was able to stitch it together to where it was seamless. But
yeah, just a quick note on that. So we do, these file sizes are big. So what we do is we're downloading them and we are uploading. Once they're uploaded, we're clearing the memory. So we're constantly like cleaning up. The only time you would see that file or the space taking up too much is when your network connection upstream is really low and that we have to pause your upload.
Yes.
And it has to stay somewhere, and it has to be your laptop. So
yes.
Otherwise, we're constantly uploading and clearing the memory requirements.
And that is a feature that I especially love because, unfortunately, the internet is generally the weakest part of the tech system that we're dealing with. And the most unpredictable, and the thing that we can do absolutely nothing about. And so having that automatic kind of throttling of the upload to make sure that the conversation continues and the recording is still going on. So that's the thing. That's one of the things I communicate actually up front, is that chances are something, more often than not, unfortunately, happens, and it's usually because of Wi-Fi, not the internet itself, because wireless networking, especially if you're near like a condo, or if you're in like New York City or a large metropolitan area, there's like just Wi-Fi networks everywhere stepping on each other. And, it only takes a drop in, for like a second for you to just kind of, that person to just stop transmitting, stop uploading or streaming to you. But it is still recording in the browser cache, even if they get dropped completely and they go away from the actual recording or on the screen. Then if they get back on quick enough, the recording continues. But if not, it'll start a second recording, which is fantastic. And then it's just a matter of like, okay, yeah, you were talking about this, and we're back now. The internet's stabilized. Let's keep going. So it's not ideal, but that's part of the job, and letting them know about that up front, and then what needs to happen. Just refresh your browser or just click join again, and we'll get right back to it. And I, as the producer or as the host, I try to be mindful of, okay, this is the last thing you said, so they can get right back into the conversation and into the flow of things.
And you made a good point, Marcus. If you're running into any sort of browser issues on the guest side, you can always tell them ahead of time. Simply just refresh the browser. Don't need to panic, right? You're going to be put right back into the room. The recording will continue. Nothing stops. And this is true even for the host. If you were to refresh the browser, all it is going to be that you would have two files instead of one, but you would be right back in the recording studio. The recording will not stop. It will continue recording. So
I will let you know, Hari, that as the producer hosting the session, I forgot, like in this new house that I'm in, I haven't had time to actually run Ethernet behind the walls to my setup. So I have to pull a cable down the hallway and plug it into the public area in next room over. And I forgot to do that before recording session one time. And so my Wi-Fi glitched and I dropped from the call as the host. And I was like, oh my gosh. And when that's happened to me on other platforms, it's like game over, done. Like we have to completely start. I have to send new links or make sure everybody's back. But Boomcaster kept going. And I was able to rejoin. Since I wasn't on camera, I ran down the hall and plugged it in really quick. And then the rest of the call was fine. But
so if you were to crash
the recordings or anything,
that's a great point. If you were to crash the browser, crash the laptop, you could come back in a certain amount of time and everything would be just the way you left it. Except that if we don't see you come back, we have to cut the stream, right?
Sure.
So at some point we'll cut the stream, but that is a feature we've built in so that there's a little bit of resilience. It's like you said, everybody has challenges with the network, and we have to build in some of that, a little bit of a buffer there.
Right. But that is another reliability factor that gives me peace of mind, that I know that even if something catastrophic happens out of my control, which the most common thing again is internet Wi-Fi. I'm okay because Boomcaster's got me. So
thank you.
So yeah, so I keep an eye on this stuff, and if the internet does get bad, like you said, I'll be able to see the uploads percentage drop here, and so I can visually see that their internet's starting to fade. And then if it gets bad enough to where I have to interject, I will, but I usually try not to, so I can go in and just unmute my mic and try to wait for a pause in phrasing or an idea, to where I can say, okay, let's just give it a second, or you're having problems, whatever. But generally speaking, it just kind of comes quickly, and I don't even have a chance to do that. But that's the type of communication I might do during a recording if I have to. And I do definitely hop on. If somebody drops, I'll hop in, and it's like, okay, yeah, we definitely lost him. Because that's the other factor in this, is like the client and the guest, they don't know if it's just on their end or if it's on the host end, or or what's going on. So even when the other person glitches, like if my client glitches for my guest, they're usually thinking, oh, something's wrong with my end of things. And I'm like, no, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah.
Let's just give them a second and we'll be okay. And it's that reassurance, because I'm looking visually at this, and I can read the data, and then I can convey to them verbally via communication that everything's going to be okay, and they don't get mentally in a place that completely derails the conversation on another level.
Yeah, and then the networks have the ability to kind of self fix things, right? And the good news is, in the background, without any reliance on the network, Boomcaster is recording you on the browser.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you set the right expectations, you're okay, right? Because you can continue the conversation.
It's a great way to put it, setting expectations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So, and then once I hit stop, I can check this as well, and it will tell me, the percentage. And the vast majority of the time, like we've been talking a lot about internet drops. The vast majority of the time, it's okay. But if anything's going to go wrong, this is what's going to go wrong. But when it goes right, just within like a minute of hitting stop recording, as long as they've got a pretty decent broadband connection, even if they're on Wi-Fi, it's usually done before they even finish saying, thank you so much for doing the recording, this turned out great, we'll make sure to send the link. Like by the time they get done with all the farewells, it's already done. And my clients know, and that's something else that I forgot to mention earlier, that I communicate up front, that this is recording in their browser, and so not to close the window. Before we hit record, I tell them, when we end, do not close the window before it finishes uploading. And the times that I've forgotten to do that, there's been one time where they're just like, okay, bye, close. It's like,
So one recommendation I have there is, you mentioned hitting stop recording. If you hit end recording, like end call, hang up button, like the red one on the right, there is a chance that your guest is going to just, close the laptop and walk away. Probably not even look at the screen, right? So I strongly recommend stopping the recording, because as soon as you do that, guest gets a notification saying, hey, the upload is either 90% or 99%, just wait a few seconds. So that gives them an opportunity to read it and be prepared to wait a few seconds. It also gives you as a host an opportunity to say, okay, you're at 80%. Hey, it might take a few more minutes after we hang up. Don't walk away,
Yes.
So
yes. And I thoughtlessly one time during a client call, I click end call instead of stop recording.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, but I like how you put them on the opposite ends, so that I just wasn't thinking. I was distracted doing something.
And this is something we've spent a lot of time on from a software perspective. How could we warn both the guest and the host? And we've added some notifications coming in. We've also, like, instantly, as soon as you hit end call, we've, fraction of a second, it pops up, stop, wait,
Yes.
But just know that, people are busy. They want to get to the next thing. And if you hung up, they're probably not looking at the screen. Like, literally, they're walking away. So
yeah. But there is a safeguard that you have in place, and pretty much all the platforms have this, but it's the same thing. And that is that you can send a link to them to say, and it's as long as they don't clear their cache or reboot their computer or something like that?
No, rebooting is okay.
Oh, cool.
You have to be very specifically going to clear all of the memory off of the, it's very unlikely someone would go do that.
Cool.
But it has to be very intentional, and
Yeah.
it's rarely happened, but it
Yeah.
can happen.
Right.
But what I would say is, even if days later, I've seen guests send, the host sent that recovery link, and as long as they open that in the browser they use for recording, it's
Right.
going to immediately restore the file and restore the upload, and it's solid. I mean, it works.
It does
every time.
Every time. I have not yet, knock on wood, I have not have any lost recordings from Boomcaster.
Good. Well,
And
that's
I
how
even
hope.
I had one guest who was on the worst Wi-Fi I've ever seen. It must have been like dial-up or something bad. Like it was bad, like the old DSL connection.
Yeah.
And
Those had good music. when they're
yeah.
connected.
And she
I missed that.
yeah. She dating ourselves here. She had like back-to-back meetings after that, and so I emailed her the link, like, hey, make sure you click this and finish the upload, because she did close her browser afterwards, and I saw that in the dashboard afterwards. And I was and at the end of the day, when she got done with all of her other sessions or whatever she was doing, she completed the upload. So by that night, it was like there, and that was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I don't lose her. But I knew I had the web compositor recording too.
That's good.
There,
it's a backup. It is not what you would want, but worst case, the hope is that you don't have to go and do this recording again, ask the same questions to the same person a week later. So we always have a backup for worst case.
Yes. And I was going to try to show that here. Go to this and share what I'm talking about with the web composited. So in addition to the individual recordings on each computer's end, it has a recording of what we're seeing in the web browser and what we're hearing live, which is a lower bit rate than what's being recorded, right? For the audio and the video, it's like a slightly more compressed data signal.
Yes.
So the fidelity is not the same. It's a lower fidelity, and everybody is on one file. So when I click on these recordings here, and you can see this one, we actually recorded the client interview here, and then we had some like ads and stuff to record before and after too. And so I've got way too many files here, but there's this web composed, and I click these three dots here, and let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see it. You can, and this is another great handy thing, copy link. I can send this to, if I had another editor or something, instead of downloading the file and uploading it to my Dropbox and sharing the Dropbox link or whatever, I can just copy this link and then they can download it directly. And then you've got the MP4 composited video with everybody on screen together, and then an MP3 file, a compressed MP3 file of everybody. And so that's my backup. If worst case scenario, the recordings, for each person here don't upload, because I have a WAV file, which is uncompressed audio, and then a high resolution MP4 of just their video that I can edit, their full screen 1080p from their webcam.
And we recently added the Studio Composed functionality that takes the single tracks and recompose them with all the customization that you put into the studio.
Very cool.
So you don't, it's just kind of a time saver, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah. I haven't played with it yet, but that's another great feature. So that is the last piece of communication in case something goes wrong, is afterwards I have to email and send that link. But at that point, and one thing I'll iterate too with this whole communication piece is the more communication you do up front on the front end of things, and the better recording you're going to get, period. Like that's just universal. Just sending somebody a link with and then that's it, and not asking them what mic they have, and they just show up with whatever, you are not, 99% of the time you are not going to get a good recording out of that. And yes, I can fix things in post that go wrong, but if everything goes right, then I have less work to do in post. And the amount of time I spend up front making sure I get the best recording possible will exponentially decrease the amount of time I have to spend in post-production. So that's why it's so important for me to, even though it's sometimes very annoying and frustrating to send all these emails back and forth, especially when people don't respond, or if I'm dealing with a publicist and I try to do my best to communicate, with them and say, hey, make sure that they have this and find out this. And, when you're going through a middle person, a lot of times, especially dealing with celebrities, you don't get the information.
Everything
so at
doesn't
that point,
get through.
yeah. And again, I have no control over that. So I do everything I can in my power. And then if they just show up with whatever, I deal with the whatever and just make it work. And then unfortunately my client has to pay for more of my time afterwards to fix the AirPods audio or whatever it is.
And I have to say, you have a few celebrities as customers, so
yeah,
I feel for you.
And that's like, it's interesting though, speaking of the celebrities, there are certain celebrities that actually show up, like Dulé. He showed up with Blue Yeti's not my favorite mic, but it's an external microphone, and he had headphones, and I didn't have to, yeah. And it's like, they know, like the certain celebrities, the really successful ones, I feel like they pay attention to those kind of details. So anyway, yeah, that gives me hope for the world. Where are we at on time? We kind of blasted through stuff. Did I miss anything, Hari? Is there anything else that
I'm trying to think? One thing maybe as a prep for the guest, one thing to look for is lighting. Do you want to touch on that?
Right. Okay. So I'm an audio engineer, so I tend to focus most on the audio, but yes. So with audio, you have not just the microphone, but the room acoustics. And the lighting is the same thing. Like you've got the camera is the input device, but the lighting and the environmental lighting is the same as like the acoustics and the microphone, for the audio side of things. And the lighting is the biggest thing. And Hari, what kind of light do you have in your setup there?
Yeah, I have one of these Amazon bought, diffusers here.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I don't have, a good camera like yours. So, it's interesting though. I think for them, they should probably see the difference, right? You have a nice camera,
yeah,
and proper lighting, and I have good lighting, but not a great camera. So
right.
There's a difference, and you can, the output is different.
yes, and there, just like with audio, there's different factors that you can play with. So you do have like the CNN look, which I feel like is like what you've got, like with the front lighting, which is great.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Right.
And I've got more like the kind of cinematic look where it's kind of like at an angle, and I've got like not just a diffuser like you have, but I also have a grid on my light. Let me switch back to my other camera so people can see. So I've got this grid that kind of focuses the light a little bit in addition to the diffuser, and it's like this flat panel LED panel that's on the back. And this whole setup here was, I think, about maybe $180 total, something like that, for the softbox and the LED panel. And I can put links to all the stuff that I have in the show notes. You can see I'm using a teleprompter here too, which, I'm overkill, so that I can look Hari in the eyes instead of, looking off to the side or down below. It's the same thing as the screen here. So
one of these streams, I'm going to force you to walk us through what you got up there. We're not going to replicate your studio, but we want to learn what we can.
No other podcaster should have this amount of junk. It's just fun for me. It makes it fun for me. And, I do actually use it to the best of its ability, but to your point about the camera, your camera is what, like less than $100?
Yeah. $80.
Yeah.
And
to go from that good look to the extra
depth,
cinematic look that I have, you're talking $1,000. So you're talking 100 times the cost for just probably an incremental change. Now, I invested in this stuff because I do a lot of other stuff with my partner and do things for clients, and I do video shoots on location, that sort of stuff. And a webcam won't cut it for what I'm, charging clients for.
Yeah.
But the lighting is the biggest factor. Hari, can you turn your light off? I can.
That would be hard for me.
So I just turned my light off, and I have an overhead light. My camera's set manually, so but it could be brighter, but it just the light is what makes the biggest difference.
If you were to use the light I have, I think it would be flat. There wouldn't be any depth to the video.
And the image would still be clear because of this nice camera, but the angle and we can do a whole other thing just on lighting.
But there's also another point I want to make from a software standpoint and a computer capability standpoint. When you or your guest has poor lighting and you're using a software like Boomcaster or any software for that matter, you're going to put extra stress on the hardware because it is trying to compensate for the lack of lighting.
Yes. And
that's going to make things worse for the conversation, either, whether it's clarity or it could also be the smoothness in exchange, right?
Lag.
Because if the lag is caused by the processor, that's going to impact the overall experience for you and the guest. So lighting is super important, whether you're recording video or not.
Yes. And the vast majority of the guests I have recorded are using their built-in laptop camera. Mm-hmm. And Apple's new cameras that were released last year in their line of laptops are actually as good as and maybe even better than some of the webcams like the one you have that are like the 4K webcams. But the vast majority of them have the older Apple. They are like terrible cameras, like especially in the low light situation. Or the other problem, not just not having a light, but then sitting in front with a window behind them where there's a bright light behind them and there's not enough light on their face. The camera tries to compensate and it gets super grainy and kind of it's just terrible.
Yeah. So I know we're towards the end of our session. Since there's a question with respect to this topic, maybe I can, since we're in this conversation, could Marcus share what light and camera he uses?
So yes, the specific light I use is a Neewer 960 LED panel. So
just Neewer?
WER. I got it on Amazon. I think it was like $100 or $110. They kind of fluctuate in price. There's like a bicolor version, and then there's an RBG version. The RBG is red, blue, green. I don't need the red, blue, green. I have it on daylight. Like I have all my stuff set to the daylight setting. Okay. So that my camera is also white balanced, and we can get into that kind of stuff.
A little bit more depth.
Yeah. So the color matters, and then the light box, and then my camera is a Fujifilm. This one is an XS10, Fujifilm XS10 with the kit lens that came with my other Fujifilm camera, set at 16 millimeters, and then this camera is my Fujifilm X-T4 with a 12 millimeter Rokinon lens, and I've got them both set to manual, and I tweak the settings.
Oh, okay. So you set the depth and everything.
Yep.
Okay. One other question, and then this is a very good question. Many guests have no lighting. What's your advice?
My advice is to ask them if they have a lamp, and they can usually move the lamp, or they can position themselves. Like the first thing, if they have a window behind them, ask them to turn. And I know a lot of times they're self-conscious of their background. And it's like that, it is what it is. Even if they can find a blank wall to where the window light is in front of them, if they can get themselves in front of a light, whether it's a lamp or a window, you can ask them to pick up their laptop and move. And the other factor is turning off the overhead light. Because a lot of times our overhead lights, especially if they're just like the generic ceiling lights, they're usually behind you and shining down this unflattering light on top of your head, and it creates these weird shadows in your face. So a lot of times turning off that light makes the whole scene darker and might make it grainier, but it might actually bring up more light because the camera can compensate automatically to get a more balanced look from the even just the laptop screen's light.
And you made a point there. Some of these cameras are capable of compensating inside of the camera itself.
Yes.
When you get the cheap cameras, they don't have that sort of processing, and it's going to rely on the computer to make up for some of the deficiencies, and that's when things do get. So what you said is very true. Like a camera like what you're using can auto compensate from any of that stuff. Like
yes, exactly. Yep.
So
and I see the lighting positioning thing similar to like the microphone placement. So that's another thing. Like I always have to ask the guests to move the microphone closer to their face. I'm like, oh, well, you can see it on camera. It's okay. It's a podcast. It's okay to see a microphone on camera for a podcast in my book.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask another question. This is from an earlier conversation. So Raf is asking, so with Boomcaster, does the need for a guest having a separate professional mic disappear? Like, for example, an ATR.
So like if they did not have a microphone at all?
Meaning, is Boomcaster compensating for a lack of a good mic?
No. Right?
Yeah,
you're not doing any kind of processing to sweeten the sound.
We're not making anything better.
No, because that would add lag as well. But it would also put a strain, like, we want to save the resources for the video and like it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
With
so our job is whatever is coming from your mic is uncompressed and the least distorted possible. Right. So if the mic itself is putting out some really bad audio, we can't fix it because we're just taking raw bits. So that's the answer to that. And there was
here's the other thing. Well, really quick. Here's the other thing with that, especially for me as a producer, but I feel like any podcaster would be better off taking the same approach that I do. It's better for me to have an unprocessed signal as a starting point, and then I can post-process it in post-production to tweak it. And then if I happen to mess something up, then I can redo it later if I need to. But starting with a pre-processed signal, I never, ever, ever want that.
It's an important distinction to make. So we talked about WAV and MP3, right? So, from the browser, you can record MP3. You can also record a WAV.
Yes.
The WAV recording is untouched.
Yes.
Which means we do nothing to that file. It's just the way it is.
Yes.
And that's what you want, because you can then edit, process, and when you downsample it to your requirements, it is exactly where you want it to be. Right?
Yes. And the WAV file is, from a technical standpoint, uncompressed from a data standpoint. So the MP3 file is actually removing bits and pieces of the waveform arbitrarily to make the file size smaller. And so everything has trade-offs. And so to get that 1/10 of a size of a file for the MP3, they're completely obliterating the fidelity of that file. So even just using WAV instead of MP3 makes a big difference in audio quality.
Yeah. So now there was another question from Raf. I know of a podcast that has requirements for his guests, and that approach kind of holds me back. Can I demand that a guest have a mic? They can use their mobile phone or a basic wired mic now. Like, he's wondering how hard we should be on the guests.
That again is a balancing act, and that is your hill to die on if you choose to. I do not feel like I can demand anything of a guest unless I'm paying them to be on the show, which I don't really believe that paying guests to be on a podcast is the best thing either, best use of money. They are giving their time. And for me to be demanding and require certain things, I feel like I can ask them, and I do try. If someone pushes back, I try my best. Again, communication, because we're all human beings, just doing the best we can. I try to express to them what the trade-offs are. That my goal in this, when I get pushback, I have this kind of answer I always give. I just want to make sure that our listeners are able to receive the story and the message that they have to give in the best way possible. And so these things that might seem like a pain to certain people, I try to express to them what the benefit is for them, for the however many thousands of listeners, you know. And if you don't have a massive audience, and you know, that's another thing. It's like, why would it be like, why would they do that? You know, if there's not an incentive, and if they're already averse to doing that. So it's hard, and that's part of the human element of this is the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. No kidding. It's always, isn't it? It was a follow-up to that. You mentioned a podcast kit sent to guests, and Raf is stored with that idea. And you and I talked about the podcast kit, and there you go.
Yeah. So I just have a mic like yours. This is a Samson Q2U, which is for $60, and every once in a while they're on sale on B&H for like $55. This is the B&H special one that's silver instead of gray. And then I have a heavier duty tripod than the one that it comes with. It's like a metal one that I got for like $18 or whatever. You don't have to do a fancy case like this. I'm just overkill because, you know, I'm just extra. And then I just have some cheap Panasonic earbuds that were like $10, and everything's connected with a USB cable and an adapter for USB-C to USB-A, just so, you know, got everything covered. And fell on the floor here. I started including this light. This is a Logitech. What is it called? Lytra. Can't read that far with my glasses on. Lytra Glow by Logitech. And so it's this little light that you can just. It has this little included mount, and it has this thing. Put this down here. That extends up so that let me switch to this here, so that you can put it up higher. And with lighting, it's always better to go higher. You know, you have to be careful if you have a hat like me. There's not a shadow, but this gets it up higher. You can see like that, as opposed to down in front like this. So that it's just a cool little thing, and it packs flat.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, and
love it.
I think it was like $30 or something like that, and it just has a USB-C charger. I think it's battery operated. Maybe not, or maybe it's dead. I don't know. I think it's actually not battery operated, which is actually better. I prefer to do wired stuff. So yeah. The other thing to consider, it costs about anywhere from, you know, $20 to $50 to ship that via USPS priority. If you have to get it there quicker, it's going to be more expensive. At that point, it's better to buy like a $40 Amazon microphone, you know, and just ship it to them. And then I just let them keep it. And of course, my clients are paying for this. I have a fortune to work with some clients that have a budget, you know, and I know most podcasters don't do that. But there's even like some $16 microphones is going to be better than the built-in laptop microphone, or especially AirPods. AirPods is just terrible.
Or even something very basic as this, right? Just
headset. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be better than the laptop built-in mic.
So there was another question here with regards to this kit that you have. Mm-hmm. Can Marcus share the podcast kit link? Is this a link is this something you put together, or is it something they can
It is,
buy?
and I used to have a page on my website, but I keep changing things, and I haven't updated the pictures and list. But
what you can do is we'll go through some of these questions afterwards, right? Yes. And then as a response, we can provide, you know, model numbers and, you know, links and things like that. We can come back and check this post, and we'll make sure that we add some of that information that you're asking. Absolutely. And then Zeke asking, hey, Hari and Marcus, Wi-Fi aside, is there a minimum system requirement to be able to record 4K videos on Boomcaster? Alternatively, can just about any laptop be able to record in 1080?
Okay. My first question would be, why do you need to record in 4K?
Great.
If you are a talking head video, like what we're doing right now, chances are the vast majority of people watching your video are going to watch it on this tiny screen. And, you know, it looks great when there's 4K video on this. But I personally feel like the amount of data and the risk it takes with that data transfer in real time is not worth it to me. I would rather deal with a lower resolution video, even though I can, spruce it up in post-production. The only time I would use a 4K video would be if I was doing some kind of wide shot. And the vast majority of the stuff I do on Boomcaster is not wide shot. I do have one client that records two people in the room. I was in the room with them, and I would record them on the same camera together. And then you could use the 4K to crop in and in post-production to each person individually. That's the only time I would want to record 4K. So, but to answer the question about minimum requirements, I would say any laptop that is more than maybe 3 or 4 years old probably would probably struggle.
On Windows side, I would say like you want to shoot for like something like an i5, and newer Macs, you could do that. And I've tested with, I have a Mac M1, but again, older the laptop, the struggle is real.
Yes.
And I would say that the other risk that you fall into is you connect a good camera like what you have,
right?
Or somewhere between my $80 camera and $1,000 camera from Marcus. It's going to be demanding on your laptop, and if you don't have a good enough laptop to handle that 4K processing, because it's encoding the video in high resolution, and it's going to need some computer processing power. And so I would say test it. And one thing I will mention with respect to configuration for Boomcaster is when you set a 4K resolution, when you come into the room, that 4K is set for everybody in the room. Okay.
Even if they have a 720p camera.
Correct. Now, we don't up, what do you call it? Like we don't up the resolution. Yeah. We don't upscale it. But the challenge is if someone has, let's say, a high resolution camera and a bad laptop, you will expose it because now you're demanding 4K from that camera. And because now you set Boomcaster to be 4K. So my recommendation is know who you're talking to, right? You want to test, you want to know that it's going to work, but 1080p for the most part works every time. Yes. 720p guaranteed, even folks with, and we also have some safety mechanisms where we would look at the processor type and the number of threads.
That's cool.
Yeah, and if you connect something like a really old laptop, we would downgrade it to a 480 or 720 depending on the processor ability.
Wow.
But we don't really check for, is it 8-core and all that. We're looking for like bare bones. Hey, are you going to make this, work with this, with this, what you're asking to do? But in general, like to your point, 4K is huge. It's a huge file.
It's four times just for reference, the size. Four times
if you and I are on this call and sat and talked for an hour, it's probably well over 2 GB or 3 GB.
Yes.
3 GB is a big file. And you take 2 or 3 of those and try to put it together. That's pretty processor intensive action right there in terms of editing,
Right. Now, the hack that I do when I do need the 4K, like I was talking about, where I have 2 hosts in the same room talking to a remote guest, I record 4K locally on my camera. So that then I have the backup of the Boomcaster recording, but I can use the higher fidelity straight from the source, from the device in post-production and pair that with the guest video. Now, if you have like a co-host that you're working with regularly, then my approach on that would be to record in Boomcaster, but then record locally as well, because you're going to be assembling things in post-production anyway. And then Boomcaster serves as a backup in case, your SD card runs out or whatever.
Yeah, and I can assure you the 4K does work, and there are special, the times when you need 4K, but you can't really publish in 4K on YouTube, for example, right?
Right.
So what do the needs are very specific, and Boomcaster supports it as long as you have the right hardware.
And you said you can publish in 4K on YouTube. You can't stream.
Correct.
So live streaming. Forget about 4K with live streaming. It's just not worth trying to do.
You're right. Yeah. So
cool.
Other than
Great
that,
question.
I think we have no other questions that I see. Let me just double check.
One last tip on the microphone, and I haven't done it. I've just only tested it. Is if they have an iPhone and a new Mac laptop that has all of the iCloud stuff syncing, like you saw when I joined that other demo session, it picked up my iPhone's microphone. And so this microphone in this is going to be better than any internal laptop microphone.
That's a good point.
Unless you have the brand new like Mac laptops that just came out this year, the mics in them are actually pretty darn good. So they would be preferred to me than a headset mic, even a decent headset mic. I would probably use the brand new Apple laptop internal mics, but you've got these options and the camera too. And they can get a 4K camera. The challenge then is finding a way to mount it to where it's up, because the laptop has it up in front of you. So most people won't have a stand for this to put in front of them to use for recording. So
we're 3 minutes over, and there's still folks hanging with us. That's fantastic.
Cool.
So one last question.
All right.
It's it's around the Amazon shopping carts and things like that. And I think you've sent me a cart before. I think what they're asking, Raf is asking, can you create a cart?
I'll do a list.
Where someone, and I'm thinking, there may be needs for more than one cart, right? There may be small, like a range of options.
Yeah, right? I've done that in the past, and I probably still have them there and just have them hidden. But I'll do a starter kit, a guest kit, and then the shipping kit to ship out. So like the guest kit would be like if you don't have time or if it's going to be too expensive to ship them your kit, you can just, here's a $15. But that one, the mics change a lot. So that's the other thing, is like the availability of some of these devices come and go. So just be aware that after a while, if you're watching this 3 months from now, those lists might be out of date.
They don't work. It might not even show up. But since I think there's one last question. If they're using speakers, is noise cancellation good enough over still suggesting for guests or hosts to use earphones?
It is good enough. I mean, you can make it work, but as the host, be aware that anytime that you say or while they're talking, it's going to duck their audio. So it's going to eliminate whatever word they are saying. So you can compensate as the host as noise cancellation. If you're not talking, it's not going to cancel your voice. That said, even just having noise cancellation on and your mic is muted, it still compresses down the signal and affects the fidelity. So asking them for earbuds, and I've had, that's one of the things, that is a hill I will die on. Having, like, I had one where I had to have them go outside and ask to borrow a pair of earbuds from somebody in the office next to them. And they came back and it took an extra like 3 minutes, but it was I feel like it's totally worth it. But you need to make that decision for yourself, I guess.
Quick clarification. The question was noise cancellation, but echo cancellation is what Warren meant. And our answer was also specific to echo cancellation.
Yes. Which there is some noise cancellation in that too, right? Like background noise cancellation.
Yes, there is. Actually, that is part of it. Yeah. So quickly, if there's anybody is interested in future topics that they would want to hear us talk about, Marcus discuss, review, we'll be happy to do that. Just throw that in the comments.
Yes.
But I think we went over time here by 6 minutes. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's always great talking to you, Marcus, and I'm glad that finally other people are also hearing you talk about these things, just not me. I'm usually the audience, and I'm sure your guests, your customers are also your audience. But I used to get free advice. So I'm glad that there's others also getting that same kind of feedback.
Well, and conversely, I feel the same way. Like the conversations you and I have had on the phone, like I'll ask you about, okay, is this doing this, and why is it doing this, and what about like when this drops, is it because of the Wi-Fi or whatever? And so having this opportunity to get it straight from the source, the person who's building the platform, to get these answers very specifically, on these details is helpful.
And as I said to you, I absolutely love the fact that you're vocal with your feedback, because, most often folks don't have the time to respond. So you take the time, you make the effort to write it, detail it. And I love it. And I'd love to hear from others as well, because we're building this with you, with the podcasters. So look forward to continue evolving this the way you would like to see this platform.
And I'm doing everything I can to make the best experience possible for the listener, everything I do. So everything that I've asked from Boomcaster to, hey, can we add this? Can we do this? It's because I want to make my experience more reliable and better for my clients so that they get a better recording, so that ultimately the listeners get the best media and listening and watching experience possible. So that's what it's all about.
It was a fantastic session. Is there anything you want to say, wrap up?
I think that's it. Like, just follow us on, Twitter, LinkedIn. Those are the main two places I'm on. And I'm on Instagram too. And ask us like other things that you'd like to hear us talk about, because we want to do this on a regular basis, right? We want to maybe start off trying to do it once a month. Maybe we haven't really talked
once
about
a month, once a couple of weeks, if we can pull this off. But we want to be consistent, so they know that this is going to happen on a regular basis, and they can come listen in. But we want to hear from you about topics. What do you want to learn about? What do you want to, do we want to bring somebody else to talk about something else? Happy to do that. But we will look forward to hearing from you. But thanks for hanging in there with us for more than an hour.
Yeah.
We had a great time and great questions. We had a great opportunity to kind of interact with you. So that's fantastic.
And thank you, Hari. Thanks for your time too.
Oh, thank you. Look forward